go now to the Climate Change Authority Chair, former New South Wales Treasurer Matt Kean. Matt Kean, thanks for your time. I'll pick up one point Barnaby Joyce made there, and it's one that critics of climate action make regularly on these matters, but I want to get your direct response to it off the back of the 2035 target. What impact will it have on climate, given other nations appear to be regressing, that Australia takes this action, but what impact will it have on combating global climate change?
Well, Barnaby Joyce called this a vanity exercise. I don't think that the fishermen in South Australia that are getting smashed by an algal bloom think this is a vanity exercise. I don't think the thousands of people who lost lives and livelihoods during the worst floods our country has ever seen up in Lismore, or the worst bushfires that our countries have ever seen in the Black Summer bushfires. I don't think they think this is a vanity exercise. And I don't think the farmers that are on the front line of this, that have seen the worst drought Australia's ever seen in recent memory, think this is a vanity exercise. And the reality is, yes, Australia is a small contributor from our own domestic emissions, but with our fossil fuel exports, we contribute around 4.5% of global emissions. That's a bit less than 1/20th, so it's not insignificant. And what we know is that the more carbon we put into the atmosphere, the more heat that we're creating, and the more extreme weather events that will result from that. So it is having a catastrophic impact, not only on Australia, but globally, and we need to be part of a global effort to reduce the amount of carbon that we're putting into the atmosphere, to stop or limit global warming, so that we can protect our lives and our livelihoods.
The Prime Minister this week said that he pointed out the correct point that China is the largest producer of solar and wind and renewables. But going through the numbers, and I read a report by, it's known as the Centre for Research on Energy and Clean Air, Helsinki-based, not a right-wing group by any stretch, but they point out that China in the first half of this year has commissioned more coal-fired power than any year since 2016. Are you worried that China is regressing on this issue?
Well, what I also know is that in last month, China installed more solar photovoltaics than the rest of the world combined. So let's put it into perspective, and let's also put into perspective how much money is being invested in the clean energy transition. Last year, it was around $2 trillion. That's double the amount that's being invested in fossil fuels. So let's put the facts on the table. We need to be basing this argument on facts, on economics, on science. And that's what we did at the Climate Change Authority. And what we found is that Australia cutting its emissions between 62 and 70% is in our national interest. We'll not only do our bit for Australia's contribution to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees, but it is also in our economic interest. There's a big economic benefit for us doing this, creating jobs, driving investment, and setting us up for a more prosperous future.
Can I ask you, again, one of the criticisms has been, you're saying it's in our interest. You look at comparable nations, say resource-heavy nation like Canada, their target is much lower, 45 to 50%. Our neighbour New Zealand, 51 to 55% by 2035. Why the disparity?
Well, what we've done is put forward a nationally determined contribution. That means every country puts forward a contribution it can make based on its own circumstances. We conducted a comprehensive sector-by-sector analysis of the Australian economy to see how far Australia could go with the technologies that are available to it while still continuing to grow our economy. And that found that 62 to 70% was in our interest. Now, I can't speak for what other countries are doing, but we do know this. 84% of the world's GDP has committed to this transition. So the countries and the economies that have underwritten Australia's prosperity for generations, they've signed up to this. They're doing this. And it's in Australia's interest to be part of that global change. This change is happening. It doesn't matter whether Barnaby Joyce thinks it is or not. The reality is the markets that have underpinned our prosperity for generations, they're changing. The good news is that we're really well placed to be able to provide goods and services to those markets in the future that will continue to grow our economy and prosperity. And what we did find is that an orderly transition for Australia compared to the counterfactual of doing nothing or a disorderly transition will see multiple times economic growth and increases in living standards for Australians. So again, that number that we put forward is in our national interest. That's been backed up by the modelling of the CSIRO and supported this week by the modelling of the best economic modelling agency in the country, the Australian Treasury. And that clearly says it's in Australia's economic interests to decarbonise our economy on this trajectory.
The Climate Change Authority, your report states that the analysis from Australian Energy Market Commission projects that residential electricity will fall by 13% and average household energy costs will fall by about 20%, about $1,000 per year over the next decade under a coordinated rollout. There's been some scepticism in reaction to that. What can you say to reassure people that this number stacks up, given recent trends would suggest otherwise?
Well, what is clear is that today the cheapest form of new electricity generation is wind, solar, backed up by storage and firming. That's not just me saying that. That's the Australian Energy Market Operator, the engineers that run our electricity system. That's the CSIRO, our chief scientific body. And in addition to that, the Climate Change Authority quoted the Australian Energy Market Commission. Today, when you're looking at the need to replace 22 gigawatts of electricity generation from our coal-fired power stations, ageing coal-fired power stations, the cheapest form of replacement capacity is now new technologies, which include wind, solar, storage and firming. They're the facts. That's what the economics says. And we need to get on with this transition.
The huge transmission lines and so on, the dispatchable technology, that all of that, the criticism both with the social licence but the economic impact on bills and so on. Can you explain? I mean, you've been digging into these numbers more than anyone in recent months. There has been that impact, hasn't there, in terms of building all the transmission lines associated with the renewables as well?
The CSIRO, Australia's peak scientific body, working with AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, the engineers who run our electricity system, they have looked at what is required to replace our ageing coal-fired power stations. It's called the Integrated System Plan. And the latest Integrated System Plan clearly says that renewables with new transmission lines is the cheapest way to replace and modernise our electricity system for consumers and for taxpayers. So we'll listen to energy policy should be about engineering and economics, not ideology. And that's what we at the Climate Change Authority have focused on, the engineering and the economics. And that's how we've put forward our advice to the government.
And on the EV target, 50% within the decade, is that realistic?
Absolutely, it's realistic. We know that electric vehicles are coming down the cost curve dramatically. Today, whilst the sticker price of an EV is still probably higher than a petrol car, the total life cost of owning an EV is multiple times cheaper, particularly if you own solar panels and you can charge using your solar panels. The savings, not having to buy petrol, for example, are multiple times cheaper. Now, that sticker price is coming down the cost curve. And we're projecting that by 2029...
Where you can't have charges? The many Australians who live in
where you have more renewable... Where you have more renewable energy in the system, that puts downward pressure on prices and increases the differential between paying for petrol and also for charging using renewable energy. So that's the first point. The second point is that the sticker price of electric vehicles is coming down the cost curve. And the modelling that we've looked at shows that the price of an electric vehicle, the sticker price that is, will be cheaper than an internal combustion engine vehicle by the end of this decade, so by 2030. Finally, this is happening right around the world. In Europe, for example, in Norway, we're seeing a huge uptake of electric vehicles. Last month in Norway, 98% of new car sales were electric. So this is the trajectory that countries are on. Finally, I will say that the vehicle manufacturing companies, the companies that produce vehicles, they're largely trending towards only producing electric vehicles. Now, Australia doesn't have a car industry, so we have to accept the vehicles that are sold into this market. And so the overwhelming new vehicles that will be coming into Australia over the horizon, the decade, will be electric vehicles. So the assumptions that have underpinned our modelling, they are reasonable. They're based on what's happening around the world and where the economics are driving things towards. And as I said, once the price makes sense, once the total cost savings are well known across the community, you'll see a huge uptake in electric vehicle sales.
In terms of the apartment question, though, people who live in apartments, and it's actually been put to me in recent days anecdotally, just around the place, people saying, how am I going to do it? But are you assuming that the battery charging technology also grows significantly so people can then, you can charge more efficiently and not require one in your own garage at home to do it?
What we're assuming is that consumers will be able to benefit from the transition of our electricity system. Now, it won't be the same as it's always been. What it will mean is that you just charge during different times of the day, for example, and you can benefit from the cheap prices that you'll see in the middle of a day like today where it's sunny, and that means we get a lot of solar PV in the system. That lowers the price of electricity, and people will see those prices on their phones, on their apps and things like that, and they'll be able to do things like charge up their cars, use their pool pumps, do those energy intensive processes and save money at the same time. So it will be, there will be a transition that occurs. Things will be done differently, but ultimately we'll get better outcomes and lower bills if we lean into it.
Climate Change Authority Chair Matt Kean, it's been a big week. We appreciate you making the time to join us this Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you as always, KJ.